Head of the Department of Liberal Arts at the Sita Majid School of Liberal Arts and Social Science, including sectarianism, religious fundamentalism, and the condition of minorities in Pakistan. His recent book, Checkered Past, Uncertain Future, The Story of Pakistan.
Why this quite an odious theme that I am trying to talk on today? So, because longue durée has hardly been discussed in Pakistan's academic circle, and I hope Fraz and Jung will be agreeing with me on that. Because longue durée history, this theme rankled into my mind when I was working on this Checkered Past book, because it is a long story to tell from Indus Valley to the current scenario that is unfolding in Pakistan. Therefore, this theme of longue durée kept on engaging my mind, that well, that is something which has become out of fashion for the historians, because we are कोई बात नहीं, गर्मी पाकिस्तान में रह के गर्मी सहना ये तो we people have jettisoned this method of doing history, which is longue durée, telling stories. I don't remember anyone doing such a thing ever since Pakistan came into being. The only edited book that comes to my mind is The Short History of Pakistan, which was edited by Ayush Qureshi. It starts from Indus Valley, but several people have contributed to it, or in Urdu, S.M. Ikram's Kausar sisters, Rudy Kausar, Afi Kausar, Modi Kausar. But it has a strange intellectual or cultural inkling towards it. Can you hear me at the back? आवाज आ रही है क्योंकि कभी होता है कभी नहीं होता. So anyhow, I've done this. Okay, it's okay. And that is the background of this theme that I have chosen, and then I recently finished two books. One was The Mediterranean, and the other is The Historian's Craft by Mark Bloch. So that too have contributed to my choosing this theme for today's discourse. So we will discuss it, we will try to understand it together. What does it mean? And whatever came to my mind, that lecture was prepared keeping in view these two books. And whatever I could recall. So not much of research has gone into it. So it's just off-the-cuff remarks that I will share with you. But I think that's something which is worth talking about and deliberating on. A few months back, I tried to read Trevelyan's autobiography. That was very, very interesting. And one thing that he said is that the most difficult task that human being can ever engage in is the telling of the story of another age. For instance, while you were living in 21st century, you were telling the story of the 16th century. That is the most creative and most arduous thing that human being can ever imagine undertaking. So we should just pay homage to Kamal Basa. He has been teaching, medieval history. So medieval history is really, and now Father Jim has taken over that mantle. So that's something really, really interesting. And when we talk about longue durée, that makes the task of historians even more difficult because it involves total history also, the concept of total history that I will just come to discuss later on. So now, how do I understand? That's a bit of my subjective understanding. So the way I read it. So that is what I will going to share it with you. The longue durée, the study of slow-moving structural forces over centuries or millennia, reoriented what historians considered evidence, scale, and causation. It forced history to speak the language of geography, demography, material life, and mentalities. It produced some of the most ambitious synthetic works of the 20th century. Above all, Ferdinand Braudels, The Mediterranean, because Mediterranean, the book of Ferdinand Braudel is rated as one of the greatest book ever written in the 20th century, and Ferdinand Braudel is rated as the best historian that the 20th century has ever produced. That reminds me of Harbans Mukhya paying a tribute to Irfan Habib when he came to government college and he offered us a lecture. He said that so far as Indian history is concerned, Irfan Habib is the best historian of the century, and other Irfan Habib will make 20th century too overcrowded with historians. But Ferdinand Braudel is a different story altogether. He stands, heads and shoulders above any other historian that we have ever seen in the 20th century. Therefore, this Mediterranean makes its case very, very strong for the serious students of history. It has to be read, it has to be commented upon. And that speaks, while looking at this book, you can very well imagine how difficult this project was, this total history as he conceived it. But the longue durée also collided with professional specializations, disciplinary fragmentation, methodological fashions, quantification, cultural turn, post-structural critique, and institutional incentives that favor shorter-term, source-driven studies. Understanding both its strengths and limits explains why histories today oscillate between very long-term structure and micro-scale event analysis. Mostly scholars are writing this micro-scale event analysis histories. They're not going into this very long-term structures, like telling you from 14th century and coming up to the 20th century. So that makes this task very, very difficult and very, very, very arduous. And then again, imagining that Ferdinand Braudel was in imprisonment when he wrote this. So that makes this task even more difficult. So what the longue durée is, if we try to define it, anything that can be defined is a very limited thing. Anything that is worthwhile can never be defined. Life cannot be defined. Human mentality cannot be defined. Human psychology cannot be defined, and history cannot be defined. Every person has its own conceptualization of history. So the basic questions, as they say, remain the same, despite the fact that human beings have made so much of a progress. What is existence, what is being, what's the relationship between the being and the existence, and what's the relationship of both of two with the ultimate being. So such are the questions which remain the same. We have to just figure out whether the definitive answers to that. How did I understand longue durée? Longue durée is a historiographical method in analytic sensibility that prioritizes slow, often imperceptible structures, geography, climate, settlement patterns, demography, entrenched economic practices, and durable mentalities over short-period events and individual actions. Geographical transformation happens in several millennia. Well, congratulations. Light is coming. Geographical, we hear from archaeologists and geologists that several centuries ago there had been a sea in Calapas area, but then it shifted. If you read Buckle's Mainspring of Civilization, he tells that Australia and Africa were very close to each other at one point of time. But then slow structural changes happened, that were geographical changes, geographical transformations, and that is the real change which offers you this discourse of long durée history. Same is the case with the climate. If you try to study this climate change that is happening right now, you will have to go to the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution brought about qualitative change in your life and your life patterns, and emissions started, polluting your air, and that's our nature. Got soiled, and so the climatic pattern underwent a change, and same is the case with settlement patterns. When was it that people from Persia and Central Asia and far beyond came to subcontinent and they settled it, and now they are called people from the subcontinent? There's a very slow change, absorption within the cultural mainstream of this area, and then becoming the citizens or the subjects or the inhabitants of that region. That was a very, very slow, gradual process. And so this process is what distinguishes this longue durée from the event-centered, personality-centered history that most of us have been doing all our careers. It sits in a threefold temporal schemes. Rapid event. Now there are three temporalities. Temporality is when you study time with reference, when you study history with reference to time. So temporality, there are three temporalities. Okay. Rapid events, medium-term conjectures, and third is the longue durée. If you study from 1707 to 1947, that will be medium-term conjectures. Or if you try to read, the Mughal Empire as such from 1526 to 1707, that will be 2 centuries to slightly more than 2 centuries, or a little bit less than 2 centuries. So it will be conjectural, medium-term, conjectural, or decade or centuries-oriented history. So in longue durée, the deepest layer of historical time, this 3-tier model is signature formulation associated with Bauer and Annales School of History. I'll just tell you a bit about Annales School of History. Now, what we have studied, what we have learned, under the banner or under the title of Annales School is that there are 3 temporal zones operating simultaneously. So these 3 temporal zones are operating simultaneously. One is very, very event-centered, that you can see, you can find sources, you can go to libraries and archives and get those documents, and on the basis of those documents you can write history. There's event-centered writing on partition, for instance, writing on the 1919 Jallianwala Bagh. That's event-centered. Or writing on Qaeda Muhammad Ali. There's one personality, and second is medium-term conjectures, that you try to understand what were the events which culminated into the formation of Pakistan. So you start reading from the advent of Muhammad bin Qasim, and then Muslims, and then Turkish, and then so even this checkered past too is medium-term conjectures. It does not go to the archaeological subtleties that underpin the discourse of history. Because I'm not even expert on Indus Valley, but that is what I venture to do. But the real, in a Brownian sense, if I want to do long durée history, then I have to start from when this region got constituted. So that's a big undertaking. So Fathan Rao, said history may be divided into three movements: what moves rapidly, what moves slowly, and what appears not to move at all. Your sensory perception cannot decipher the movement that is going on, in your geography, and your climatic transformations, and your genetic pool, and so many such things associated with it. So now the other thing is that why long durée method, theoretical and empirical gains? Because ever since the British method of doing historiography or history was introduced to us, we have fallen into that you can say habit of doing a structural history. We create structures, and within those structures we do history. And structures means you set a time limit to it, you set a spatial limit to it, time and space bound histories that we are doing. If you go to the older histories, the way Tabari wrote history, or Masudi wrote history, or Ghazni wrote history, they were not time bound, they were not space bound either. They were, far larger. In a way, it was a long durée history of its own kind. But ever since this modern way of doing history was introduced in the subcontinent, whole subcontinent not only shifted from doing medieval history, it also concentrated, and it only concentrated doing modern history. So long durée was beyond the scope of their imagination probably. And so because history became far too restricted for us, so it was not at all total history. So the first thing is it rebalanced causation. Instead of treating critical events and great men as first causes, long durée historians asked what background conditions made these events possible. The result is a more structural causality in which immediate causes are read as expression of deeper, slower processes, climate cycles, trade networks, agrarian systems. This orientation reshaped how historians explain continuity and change. Well, while talking about this, I must say that Marxist interpretation of history also had a very strong impact on the way 20th century historians came to understand this, when it moved away from the event and the personality as the first cause of any event happening here. Whenever we try to read history, in our own circumstances, what are the immediate things that we harp on? We harp on event. Well, one event was led to another event, and the happening of that event was caused by a personality. So personality, event, king, battle, personality, event. That is the rut that we are imprisoned in. So it was through the social interpretation of history undertaken by Karl Marx and later on Marxist historian, particularly George Lukács. That we were persuaded to wean away from that pattern. You have to build your own pattern. You have to challenge older patterns. So create your own pattern. So that is what is very, very important. And that pattern must not be personality oriented or event. Event is very limited. Personality is more limited than even an event. So we are focusing far more on those two categories to analyze history. So that is what long durée history talks a lot about. It expanded evidence and methods, that made making history or doing history very, very difficult. To study long-term structures, historians borrowed from geography, climatology, study of climate, demography, shift of population, economics, and anthropology, and particularly anthropology. Now it becomes indistinguishable whether we are doing history or anthropology, because anthropologists have to read so much of a history and the vice versa. Since we have been shoved into the lap of the structural history, it is largely because of anthropology and sociology. August Comte onwards, you just imagine, we are into one साल में क्या हुआ, intensive study on 5 years. Then the immediate problem becomes evident. How to correlate the context leading to those 5 years. So when you try to interlink context with that event or those 5 years, that becomes problematic, but not a lot problematic for the historians. So this is something really very, very serious and very important. The Annales school promoted an allied sciences approach, statistics, material culture, maps, ecological data, and quantitative series became legitimate historical evidence. Darwin's practice of using maritime charts, climate descriptions, and economic flows in the Mediterranean exemplifies this widening of sources. That is the reason reading Mediterranean is a pen in the neck. You just have to concentrate a lot. You have to keep reading one paragraph, one after the other. It is a difficult reading. I like and I enjoy reading philosophy, but Ferdinand Bargel is even more challenging than reading Heidegger, for instance. So because when it comes to maritime charts, I am averse to reading those schedules, those timetables, those charts, those maps even, because I don't have, God hasn't given me that gift of deciphering how to read charts and maps and all that. But Ferdinand Bargel uses it in profusion, profusely using that. So that makes it into a very, very difficult read. It created synthetic comparative histories. So, synthetic and comparative histories. Those people who have gone to England, like has been to Royal Holloway and France, and most of us have this exposure. They have been saying, well, you're talking about Islamization in Pakistan, so better compare it with the Islamization experiment that went on in Egypt and the Islamic resistance to Jamal Abdel Nasser vis-a-vis the Islamic resistance to Ayub Khan. So this comparative analysis became in vogue. Ever since Annales started writing history, the long durée encourages large-scale synthesis, regional or global frames that can reveal patterns invisible at the micro level. For example, why certain ports gain primacy across centuries, or how agrarian systems shape critical forms. Braudel's Mediterranean study is a paradigmatic synthetic geography history, combination. One book that comes to my mind is the best example of this is Wittfogel's study of hydraulic societies. I'm writing a small booklet sort on China, and that too is becoming very, very difficult because China is something we claim that we're great friends, but we hardly have read anything on China. So this Wittfogel's book is very, very important. The way they centralize the whole system by controlling water. So that gives you a glimpse into geography, into climate, into water resource, and the unfolding of the discourse of history when it comes to water and control over water. So that too had quite a bit to do with long period history. So mentalities and history from below, these are two things that are being discussed quite a lot these days, along with environmental history. Three things that are very, very current, very modern, very fashionable in the world academia, social sciences, and as well as humanities are these mentalities, the history from below, and the third is environmental history. Dipesh Chakraborty has shifted his interest to environmental history and so many others. Annals historians emphasize collective mental framework mentalities in everyday life structures rather than only elite decision making. This helped produce history from below traditions and cultural history that investigates popular beliefs, rituals, and practices as durable structures. This is popular belief, rituals, practices, the way you feel, that is mentality. एक आम आदमी कैसे रिएक्ट करता है, उसकी सोच कैसे करता है, its feelings, its emotions, its sentiments, its belief system, its rituals, and so these things underpin the durable structures that constitute long durable history. Mark Bloch and Lucien Febvre insisted in widening the historian's attention to long-lasting social habits. So it influenced related fields. Ideas from long duration shaped world systems analysis, environmental history, economic history, and comparative urban studies, providing conceptual tools to speak across disciplinary lines about scale and structure. अब इसने जो हिस्ट्री का सारा जो फोकस है उसको ब्रॉडन करना जो है imperceptibly we have done that without reading long durée, without reading annals but a cyclical down effect happened and we have broadened the scope of history I'm also also doing something on literature, for instance. There's Lahore's Urdu Sphere. And similarly, a book that reached me a few weeks back from America was Cosmic Connections, written by Charles Taylor. And now Charles Taylor is a Sikha-Band philosopher, but he is talking about poetry. और जब से एल्गोरिथम्स की बात होना शुरू हुई है, जब से ये जो machine, the human servitude vis-a-vis machines इसकी discussion होना शुरू हुई है. Poetry has become a very, very powerful tool in a bid to restore the autonomy of humans vis-a-vis machines, though it's impossible rather that we can break away from the control of machines. Because our lives have been regulated by machines already. और ये इसमें जो nexus अगर आप किताब पढ़ लें, you already read it. Otherwise, it seems to me as an atrocious historian. But that book, he has vitiated, he has trivialized this law and
He seems to be more of a propagandist than a historian.
It's a very, very important way for all of us to bear in mind. There is a very fundamental and significant difference between propagandist and historian. Many people say that they are historians, but they are not historians. Historian को जितना misuse किया है religion के history. Everyone is a historian. So Dr. First Mahmood used to say that whenever I'm, whenever in Gymkhana anyone asks me in which discipline have you done your PhD? So I say mathematics. Because if I say I'm a historian, then they start telling me what history is. And this happened to me. I'm traveling in a bus and भाई साहब की करते हो खाना की पढ़ाते हो हिस्ट्री अच्छा तो हिस्ट्री सच भी कदे बोलती है मैं कभी नहीं करी for God's sake just leave me alone. And then the whole 5 hours is I'm listening and he is talking and he is educating me as to what my profession is and how should it be, and so on and so forth. So, Fadl Pravdos, the Mediterranean and the Mediterranean world in the age of Philip II. This is the full title of the book. First published in 1949, is the clearest, most influential instance of longue durée thinking. Its method combines 3 interlocking layers: geographical and physical time, quasi-immobile, seascapes, coastlines, climate constraints that change only very slowly, structural time, that's social and economic structures, demography, agriculture regimes, trade routes, and event time, politics, wars, diplomacy, the surface where human agency appears to operate. I repeat these 3 things, very, very important for the students of history to remember. Geographical and physical time, seascape, समंदर कैसे अपना रास्ता बदलता है, कहाँ पे ऑपरेट करता है, that's seascape. Coastlines now, a human being has mastered to operate or to manhandle coastlines. Great thank you to recover karna. Once I went to Singapore and on flight I was reading the excerpt in Economist where they had written that there is a tiff going on between Thailand and Singapore, And what was the real bone of contention? The bone of contention was that Singapore was implicated, that is, stealing sand so that it has to reclaim land from the sea. And therefore Thailand was about to send its armed forces to teach Singapore a lesson. But beneath the surface, there was a sense of envy that Singapore was making so much of a progress. It became a model state, whereas Thailand is like slightly better version of current Pakistan. So these are recent events, but Bravo, he thought that seascapes, coastlines, climate constraints, that change only very slowly. Like in 1867, in Lahore, there was a snowfall. It was the last time that Lahore had a snowfall was in 1867. So, but now, can you ever imagine that there will be a snowfall in Lahore? Never. Not really. Because it's a gradual change in the climatic conditions. So, structural time, social and economic structures, demography, agricultural genes, trade routes. Like you can see that GT road still exists. So there are other trade routes also, but the centrality of GT road can never be questioned even now. So linking one part of subcontinent from Peshawar to Calcutta, that was the road, and it has still has a very interesting book by Razali Apti was journalist. And then event time. Mostly the history that we read is this that's imprisoned or incarcerated into event time. Politics, wars, diplomacy, the surface where human agency appears to operate, because studying event time is very accessible, very easy for us. Very easy for us to teach. It's quite explicitly visible to the naked eye. Teaching 1965 war, saying that we won the war. Indians say no, they won the war. So that's event time. So there are three types of times for the historians to take into account: geographical and physical time, structural time, and event time. Temporality and spatiality, these are the two categories. It's very, very important for all the history students to take into account. Temporality, your engagement with time. Time as history. History is time. What's the relationship between this time and history? That is very, very important. And what is the relationship of geography, of space with history? So these are three variables: history, time, space. This trio enables you to analyze things. So whenever you are learning something, or you have been asked to analyze any events or any historical discourses, these are the things that, in which time period Jinnah did this and this, because he was living in a specific time. He was living in a specific space. Why Babur, came from Kabul and he fought a war? Because of the exigencies of time, because some constraints that space put him under. So all such things have to be deliberated on. Raoult's book downplays singular events and magnifies how space and material rhythms shape human behavior over centuries. Scholars credit this work with both expanding historical imagination
and setting a high bar for interdisciplinary synthesis. बहुत मुश्किल काम करते हैं because that is what total history is all about. Total history means that, economic history, history of medicine, environmental history, economic history, financial history, history of science, all comes under the purview of a total history. They are not independent sub-disciplines, they are part of history. Now the real problem is that we historians have acquiesced to this notion that, well, history of medicine is different, history of science is different. In Jawaharlal Nehru University, this history of science is different, and they have their graduation in sciences. Since we people are a bit averse to sciences, particularly a person like me, don't like science at all. Therefore, we don't dabble into anything scientific. So, Annales School, founded in 1929 by Mark Bloch and Lucien Fabry, articulated a program of total history that set the scene for longue durée. Study society as a complex whole used non-traditional sources and blurred boundaries with social sciences. Bloch and Fabry program explicitly rejected an exclusive focus on critical narrative and biography. Now, very many of us do biographies. Even I have been thinking of doing biography. But that will be limiting the remit of history, to a single person. So to what extent, you can expand the activities and the vision of a single personality who can cover the whole temporality and spatiality of the contemporary period. That's questionable. A characteristic Annales formulation from mid-century is that historians should study structures, economic, social, mental, rather than only civics. As Britannica summarizes, under Bowdell's leadership, the Annals replaced the study of leaders with the lives of ordinary people and emphasize geography, demography, and material life. So now I think we have. आप लोग बोर तो नहीं हो रहे, आप तो कहेंगे कि नहीं हो रहे बोर, लेकिन अंदर तो होगा कि यार ये अब जाए ये क्या. Should I cut it short? Conclude it, or you want me to tell you why long durée history has fell into partial disuse? वैसे ये हमने बात तो कर ली हुई है.
Be careful of time and space.
So you can take 10 minutes more and then student can answer.
Okay.
सवाल जवाब.
Okay. I will be quick. So ये मेरा था कि हमने छोड़ क्यों दिया है ये. I was just leafing through book of Makash, Ghulam Murtaza Makash, तारीख़-ए-अक़वाम आलम. तो तारीख़-ए-अक़वाम आलम आजकल तो कोई नहीं लिखता, अगर लिखता भी है तो it's more of a propaganda than so but people have been writing all this. Similarly, that reminds me of Zakaula's book, Tarikh-e-Hindustan. It runs into several volumes and is very detailed. So why is it that we haven't developed that sort of a history? Instead of developing it, we have switched lanes, and as Leopold von Ranke's style of history that we have adopted. So professional specialization and archivalism, the professional historians' training, promotion, and publishing incentives rewarded archival mastery, tight empirical monographs, and documentary novelty, microhistories and focused archival excavations, village studies, legal cases, court records. Two people have been playing there. Is my friend Ilyas Chatter, and then Zahir Mahmood also did on Shahpur, and publishers then don't publish it. Because it's too narrow focus. Microhistories and focused archival excavations, village studies, legal cases, court records often placed a premium on close reading of sources rather than sweeping structural analyzations. Funders, tenure committees, and peer reviewers frequently preferred tight, source-driven scholarship. For this, I give credit to my colleague Dr. Vikas Sajjad when we were discussing it, and so this point was brought to the fore by him. That if you dabble into, you try to do long period history, then obviously you will not be promoted, because one project may last for 25 years, and then you won't be able to publish much, of course, and then that will not serve the purpose, because no one has the attention span to read, books like Mediterranean. So the cultural turn and emphasis on discourse, identity, and language. From 1970s onward, the cultural turn redirected attention to symbols, narratives, language, identity, and representation. Post-structuralist critiques and theorists such as Hayden White and White's this theory of microhistory. That too is not an easy book to read, microhistory. Questioned whether the grand causal narratives or structures could account for meaning and subjectivity. Cultural historians often argued that durable structures must be read through ways people represented themselves, methodological shift that every medium to shorter and interpreting readings. Like this was from 1970s when Foucault, Derrida, and this guy Hayden White, they started saying a few different things. The history of subjective self. What do you think about? The questioning of objectivity, and the objectivity being the main principle on which the whole edifice of history used to be constructed. That was questioned. And out of this Scotland studies also came into being. That, well, we don't believe in objective criterion of determining history. We give credence, we give significance to the subjective, because that's the reason our young people are interviewing people, asking about their life histories, about the experiences of partition. Now, the citizen archives, they are thinking about interviewing those guys who had experienced Dowlak's time, tyrannical times, so to say. And similarly, interviews of Afghan Muhajirin before all Afghan Muhajirin are shifted back to Afghanistan. There was no one to interview. So all such things, so subjective analysis, identity and language and discourses, all this are part of your subjective. आप कौन सी ज़बान बोलते हैं, आपकी ज़बान के ज़रिए से आपकी आइडेंटिटी मुतय्यन होती है, तो उससे जो आप ऑब्जेक्टिव हिस्टोरिकल डिस्कोर्स से थोड़े से फासले पे आ जाते हैं. You create distance between the objective history and your subjective and the experience. Then quantification and the crisis of social sciences. The Annales flirtation with large-scale quantification and social scientific modeling produced both enthusiasm and backlash. Social science methods matured historians debated their limits. Some argued that quantification risked threatening meaning, while others felt Annales' program had already become too diffuse. So Garfield himself later reflected on tension between history and social sciences. This quantification. The way I understand history is telling of a story. People say that those nations rule who can tell their stories. How many of us can tell our story? Whether we have any story to tell. Do we have any attention spent to tell a story or conceive of a story? That is a big question. So this quantification method has, dealt a fatal blow on the storytelling faculty of history and historian. So that's the reason I refer to it on far too many occasions that all big historians in Pakistan, they have their first degree in literature. K.K. Aziz did his master's in English literature. Aziz Ahmed also, I.H. Qureshi also from St. Stephen's College. Jagannnath Sakal has its first degree in literature. So literature and history are like twiddledum and twiddledum. They go together. वो historian जो कि literature नहीं पढ़ता और मैं तो ये बहुत कहता हूँ कि जो दोस्तोवस्की को नहीं पढ़ता वो अभी तक पैदा नहीं हुआ। So आप पढ़ें और पैदा हो जाएं।
चलिए कुछ और भी शामिल।
नहीं अभी आप ये तो पढ़ने पड़े ना पहले गाजी साहब जब आप पैदा हो जाएंगे तो फिर आपके पास
जो आप बात कर रहे थे
आपका दरिया पढ़नी चाहिए। So micro historical projects इसमें दो लोग बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट हैं जो कि दुनिया में हर जगह पे पाए जाते हैं। कार्लो गिन्सबर्ग की किताब जो है मैं ये समझता हूँ कि कार्लो गिन्सबर्ग और ये जो है हिस्टोरियंस क्राफ्ट ये दोनों आपको जरूर पढ़नी चाहिए। हिस्टोरियंस क्राफ्ट और कार्लो गिन्सबर्ग की क्या नाम है उसका? cheese and worm, worm and the cheese, cheese and the worm, cheese and the worm. Cheese and the Worm, Carlo Ginzburg, it changed the total discourse of history. This book, one small book, is not very hefty. It must be available. And then Natalie Zemon Davis, American historian, showed how intense focus on a short period in a small community can reveal nuances, contingency and agency. इस तरह की ये जो terms हैं ये जो जिसकी वजह से आपको अमेरिका से पलट जो लोग हैं वो आपके ऊपर बहुत रोक डालते हैं इनको थोड़ा सा मास्टर कर लें ये nuances क्या होती हैं subtlety क्या होती है contingency क्या होती है और agency क्या होती है ये these are the terms which have been brought into the discourse of history by social sciences. ये बुनियादी तौर पे तो those terms were introduced by anthropologists. And microhistory's success helped legitimize narrowly focused studies and argued that big structures may obscure crucial human meanings. तो इसमें वो कहते हैं ना कि जो that book by Paul Kennedy, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, that was one book responsible for the victory of George W. Bush, victory in elections of 1988, after, of course, when Reagan had completed his 2 terms. So that one book caused that upheaval and George W. Bush Senior became president. So such was the influence of this small duration history or event-centered history world. So जो macro level history है वो ये काम ही करता है. It will give you lots of imagination, lots of food for thought, lot more to think about. You can reborn into a new world after reading it. लेकिन ये है कि वो उसके ऊपर मेहनत बहुत ज़्यादा लगती है और immediate जो meanings हैं वो आपको नहीं मिलते. Then global and post-colonial critiques and then practical difficulty of evidence and scale. आपको evidence जो है उसके लिए ढूंढना, like you know, if you are reading about the state of peasants of Punjab in the 16th century, it's going to be very, very tough ask. Where would you know, Europe में तो possible है, but you know, in Africa and Asia, things are very, very difficult to find it. So this long durée history is very, very important, and I think we historians should talk more about it. But you know, it's a difficult thing. Like you know, Rahman kept suggesting to me that I should write social history of Pakistan. So I knew what you know, difficult situation he was trying to push me into, because social history means, you know, you have to be young, you have to be energetic. बलूचिस्तान में जाएं और वापस आए ना, ये भी possibility हो सकती है. So that too is a borderline long duration. So I think बाकी मैं ये प्रोफेसर रुखसाना को दे जाऊँगा, ये आपने डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर लेंगी तो आप इसको पढ़िए, फिर you know, you can raise questions, फिर 6 महीने साल के बाद दोबारा से मैं आऊँगा तो फिर